Hello, I'm Cecily Saylor. I'm the founder of Typewriter Tarot, and I'm very excited to welcome you to our first public episode of Cosmic Rescue. Cosmic Rescue is a series where we talk to interesting, creative people about creative problems they're facing, and we interrogate that problem using the magic of tarot. And we also leave you with a tarot spread you can try on your own to see how that problem is showing up in your creative life and what, if anything, you might want to do about it. To kick off our series, we are very excited to welcome an incredibly special guest. He is the author of the best-selling series, The School for Good and Evil. His name is Soman Chainani, if you haven't already heard of him. And the School for Good and Evil series has sold more than 30 million copies. It has been translated into 30 languages on 6 different continents. And it will soon be a major motion picture out from Netflix in 2022. Soman also has a new book coming out called Beasts and Beauty, coming in September of 2021 from HarperCollins. And Soman is just an incredibly devoted Leo who is always writing and always devising new novels and new stories to share. He has a background in filmmaking. He is just a wonderful person to talk to. I'm so glad to know him. Today we're going to be talking about what it's like when you're really, really committed to your craft and your work, like so committed that you can show up on the New York Times bestseller list every time your book comes out. That devoted, and also find the space for love in your life. So we'll be talking about that today. We recorded this a little earlier in the pandemic, but we're really excited to share it with you now. And we would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also like this video. That helps it get seen more around the YouTube space. And please also follow us on Instagram at Typewriter Tarot. We're soon going to be doing a giveaway of a set of 4 books from the School for Good and Evil series. So find us there, enjoy the conversation, and thank you for watching. Hello, Soman Chainani. Thank you so much for coming on Cosmic Rescue and talking with us. I'm so excited to see you again.
I'm excited too. Last time I came, I got to not only meet you, but get a tarot card reading, and it was so good. I used to talk to all my friends about it, and they were like, can I do a virtual one? And I was like, you should just go see her. But this was pre-pandemic, and now I'm like, oh, I should tell all my friends to do a virtual reading, because that's probably the only way to do one now.
That's right. That's the way to do them these days. They're just as wonderful. I've been telling people, and that was such a pleasure meeting you. That was back when we could just meet up in a hotel lobby, and I could do tarot wherever. So fun. Well, I love that we're going to talk about creative work and personal relationships for this conversation. But before we dig into that, I just would love to hear, and I'm sure others would as well, you are always working really hard. The author of so many books that have done so well. They're so popular, so well loved. Talk about what you've been doing as, in your professional writing life during the pandemic.
So it was strange timing, because I've been writing the School for Good and Evil series for 8 years. God. And I finally finished it, the last book, which was going to come out in June. I finished it in March, and I finished it on March 11th. And I remember that's when the wave was hitting New York, and we literally put it to press about 5 hours before Cuomo announced the shutdown. So it's just sort of weird cosmic confluences of many things, right? This journey coming to an end, and then this whole kind of new period in the world starting at the same time. And I went down to Florida that night. I just kind of lay on the floor for 3 days, staring at the ceiling, being like, well, now what happens? Because normally when you finish a big journey like that, you take some kind of separative break. You go on a long vacation, or you move to a different city, or you go travel for a while or something to re-energize and kind of start fresh. And, it wasn't there. It was a little bit like being trapped in a house. So I ended up realizing that this wasn't going to be fixed anytime soon. And I had at least 3 or 4 months to myself alone in a house. And so I ended up writing another book, and I rewrote all the Grimm's fairy tales to sort of match the world we live in now. And I wrote them as if they're in the 1800s or whatever, but to teach kind of new lessons that fit kids today. So that'll be my next book that comes out next year. And I just finished that this week. So I've basically been using the whole pandemic to just keep working in the hopes that I'm postponing this inevitable long period of like rest and relaxation that I hope to have at some point when the world gets back to normal and we're allowed to travel again. So that's where I am sort of mentally at the moment.
That book sounds amazing. I can't wait to see how the fairy tales are incorporated or like reflecting our modern situation. Can you give like one example of what, maybe you can't talk about the book, but.
Let me think if I can think of something. Like for instance, Sleeping Beauty to me, I sort of redid to kind of reflect. I thought about what Sleeping Beauty was about. And when you read the original Sleeping Beauty, it's very much about the passivity of women and how women are born to suffering and everything that happens to Sleeping Beauty in the tale, including, if you read the original story, it's really about rape, about how that's like a woman's lot in life, is this idea of suffering and overcoming suffering. And I thought to myself, well, let's make it about a man, and we're gonna make it about someone who's sort of struggling with his sexuality. And it became sort of a reinvention of Sleeping Beauty about sort of like a gay awakening almost, that I thought mirrored, kind of what women would have gone through back in the 1800s. So sort of taking the kind of general lesson that was originally in the Grimm's Tale and transposing it to, a new theme, but also then switching up the ending to make it empowering, right? I don't believe in a passive hero. So, a lot of sort of classic fairy tale heroes get their revenge in a different way in these stories. So yeah, it was super fun to write. It was like wish fulfillment in a lot of ways.
That sounds amazing. Fairy tales are wonderful because they include all of this darkness that I think we are starting to pick up on as we grow into the world, but they're riddled with toxic narratives that I know have like made my life more difficult.
No, everybody goes up with them, and everybody goes up with these wrong lessons. And I was like, I'm just going to rewrite them as if the Grimms wrote them. So the language is very, it's the same. I've studied fairy tales all my life, so I know exactly how they sound, And so I wanted it to sound as if they were from that era, that they just teach very different lessons.
That's awesome. Do you feel like you had more time to work during the pandemic instead of taking this nice long trip to sort of celebrate what you had completed. Does the work also function as a distraction for you to kind of tune out some of the changes that are going on in the real world? Not that you ignore them, but.
No, but I think it did. It made time go very quickly. And I think when you're working on a book, it's very easy to unconsciously take what's happening in the world and channel it into your work. So I felt like it helped me make sense of it. And I think when I finished this particular book, I think in a lot of ways psychologically, I probably handled the pandemic a lot better than my friends and family, probably because I had a way to almost journal it through stories,
You had an outlet, yeah.
I had an outlet. So it felt very natural to me to be going to work on something every day, that incorporated my feelings. And especially because it's 12 stories, and story was able to sort of mirror whatever I was thinking about at the time. So like, I never knew what story was going to come next, but like Snow White was written right in the middle of the George Floyd stuff. And in my story, Snow White is black. Her mother names her Snow White because it's a town where everybody's white. And so she calls her Snow White as almost like a joke because she's the only black girl in town. So I don't know if that story would have been about that had it not happened, had I not gotten the inspiration for it right in the middle of that. So everything that was happening got churned into a particular story at a particular time.
Incredible. Well, you also, you are a Leo. Leos are very playful. They're very kind of showy. They like to, they're fire signs. They use their magical powers to mesmerize people. And you do that very much in the books that you write, but like on Instagram, you're also very much like a presence that's performing. Like your outfits are amazing. You look incredible. We get to see you trying all these different things. I just saw a video. What's it called? Where you were doing the bars? No, the ring.
Oh yeah.
Gymnastics.
Playing around. Yeah. I think to me, like, I grew up, a lot of the people I idolized growing up were Leos. Like Madonna was my favorite one because I felt like everything she did was about trying on different skins in a way and trying on different, versions of yourself, and someone told me once, and I thought was really interesting, this idea that like the worst thing that can happen at the end of your life is you have an inkling that the person you are is not who you are meant to be, And so I think that always stuck with me, even through like being a teenager and things like that, of like, okay, well, keep trying things, keep, trying to reinvent yourself and do things that you have an inkling to do just to see, to get yourself closer to who you really are. So I think that's a very Leo thing. Leos are quite showy. I think they tend to be narcissistic, but in a playful way, sort of like a self-aware way versus a Donald Trump way. And I think there's a sensitivity underneath all of it. I think Leos tend to get more psychically wounded than other people.
Well, and you put yourselves out there more, which is riskier. Like a lot of us, Capricorns like me are like, well, I'm just going to do my work over here. No one needs to look at it too carefully. But y'all are the ones who are out there, like just enchanting us with what you do, or with your movements or songs. I think of like in the wands or the sun in tarot are very Leo-like. And I associate them with people like Prince and Cher and Madonna, like you're talking about, who can just cast a spell over you with their performative nature. But because like I think your Leo energy gets channeled into the literature you create, and also the way that you embody that whole world of your literature through like some personification in your own life, you're just really focused on your work. It seems to really fuel you. And so in this conversation, you wanted to talk about bringing in relationships, personal relationships, at a time when you're extremely focused on your work. Like, how can you keep plugging away at all the things that have made you super successful, while also opening the door to another person who will shake things up, who will ask you to compromise, and who will invite you into their world at the same time. So talk a little bit about, what all that means to you, or what it's like trying to date while also crushing it as a best-selling author.
I mean, I think relationships are funny because I think in sort of the ideal world, you want to find someone at a fairly young enough age that you can grow up together. You can sort of like figure stuff out together and sort of shape each other as like a team. And I think for me, because I came out of the closet fairly late, like 21, 22, and also had a lot of stuff to work through on my own, just from childhood and things like that. I wasn't really ready to think about actually dating someone in a serious way until my sort of early 30s, like even mid 30s. And so by that time, the books had to take, and my life kind of changed in that I went from being an aspiring artist to a professional one. And there's such different things, I think, because when you're an aspiring artist, the energy is very different. You're so uncertain, right? And I think in a way, it's easier to build a relationship at that time almost, because another person can help you kind of shape, the direction of where you're going to go. I think when you're a professional artist, you've finally gotten to do the thing that you've always wanted to do. And so, at least in my case, you become very focused, right? And you take advantage of your opportunities. You don't take anything for granted, and like, you don't cheat the process. And so I work super hard, and it's always my number one priority. And I think a lot of people who date people who are artists for a living will often say the one thing you have to deal with when you date an artist is their number one loyalty is to their work. And it will always be. It's just our nature, it's just how it is. And so the question of how a relationship fits into that is tricky, because if your number one loyalty is always going to be to your work, what do? I remember I talked to Judy Bloom. She had this lovely kind of public birthday party that I was the MC for. And we started talking about relationships, and she was like, my writing and relationships were always incompatible. She goes, until I met my current husband. And she goes, and for like 10 years, he ruined my writing because I just couldn't do both. I couldn't have this like amazing, fantastic relationship and go back to my being loyal, my number one loyalty to my work. So I guess all that sort of begs the question of, okay, now that I'm actually ready for a relationship, I think, in my life, what should it look like? What do I do? What am I looking for? What do I avoid? These sort of like big questions,
Yeah. So we're going to take those questions to the tarot. Though I wish I could hear more stories about Judy Bloom's birthday party. Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
Wow. It's so awkward having a public birthday party because it's on a stage. So you're basically hosting a party for an audience. It's very weird. It was a very strange experience. But anyway.
But it was for Judy Bloom.
It was for Judy Bloom. And let me tell you, she will never do it again because she is famously a germaphobe. And, she came in that day and she was basically like, okay, this was 2 years ago. So she was like, only touching people's elbows, stay away. Like, I was like, when this thing hit, my first thought was Judy Bloom will never be seen in public again.
Poor Judy Bloom. She just can't handle the world anymore. Well, her books were lifesavers for me as a teenager. Okay, so we designed a 4-card tarot spread, and the first question we're asking for this card is what can a relationship do for my life? So like professionally, things are pretty things are on track. Things are going super great. You're not wanting for much in your life, though I'm sure you have desires and hungers like everyone. So this is a question of like, what can a relationship bring in that you may be enlivened by? I have my tarot cards spread out here. It's the Pagan Otherworlds deck, which is the same deck we used last time I saw you, if that's okay. Yeah. So I'm going to move my card over for this episode. We're doing the reading in the conversation. I'm going to move my hand over the deck and you just tell me when to stop.
Okay.
All right. So this is what can a relationship do for my life? Here we go.
You can stop.
Okay. You have a 3 of Swords. I feel like this card was in your last reading too. This is a card of sometimes like unprocessed pain or like a wound that's emotional, but from a longer time ago that is now like migrated into the mind. And so when I see this card in people's readings, it makes me think that there's the potential to revisit something from the past that, given where you are in life today, you can understand whatever caused the pain, whatever dynamics were at work. You can understand them with more sophistication, with a new level of nuance, with just a different perspective. And so this isn't like super sexy, fun relationship card, but it is a really powerful card for a relationship because, as my therapist would always tell me, like relationships are the place for healing. Like we heal most through relationship, not on our own. And so there may be, there's a person out there or several people out there who can join you in some kind of like mirroring process where like you've shared experiences that can help, you can sort of help each other to understand past experiences that have been painful in new ways, and also kind of forge a new reality together where the kinds of things that used to cause pain in life are not present because both of you are actively, mindfully creating a world where those kinds of pains don't happen like without awareness. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Total sense. Makes total sense.
So it's not like the relationship is meant to bring you sadness or meant to bring you three knives in the heart, but rather a relationship can bring you some deeper healing, really, around something that would be like, not to say there's like some great horrible tragedy buried in your past, but just we're always healing all the time and kind of evolving around those things. What do you see or think about when you see this one?
I think that makes sense, just because, like I said, there was a lot I had to work through, in my life, kind of psychologically and emotionally. And I think because I've spent so much of my life single, that hasn't been tested in sort of that kind of like longer term, relationship that lasts like a number of years. So I think it makes total sense. The idea that like I can't truly kind of see where I am until I'm with somebody else.
Yeah, or it brings you a new way of seeing that you can't enact all onto yourself. So our next question was, what would be a compatible energy for you? So like as you're dating a kind of energy, if you feel it or sense it or notice it, you might want to like call that person again if the date goes well.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to start over here again, and you just let me know when to stop.
Okay.
Okay, for this one, you have the Eight of Swords, more swords again. And this one is somewhat related. I can see a connection between the Three of Swords and the Eight of Swords. But the Eight of Swords is about liberating the self and deconstructing, becoming aware of the thoughts in our minds that keep us in our own kind of cage, whether that cage just sort of keeps us from expanding into our fullest self, or thoughts and ideas that keep us from trying brave new things, thoughts that tell us we shouldn't be doing this. This is the card of insecurity, the card of imposter syndrome, the inner critic. It isn't just that, it's the process of becoming aware of that and also freeing oneself from it. So there's like the energy you would be looking for is someone who might be telling stories of how they transformed their own lives from being kind of a smaller person who was living by the rules that parents, family, society taught them, versus coming out of that narrative themselves and saying, no, I'm this person. I don't have to operate under these restraints. I don't live within this narrative that people told me. And so the process of this card is like pulling all of these, you can see they form a barrier to this like beautiful castle or like home in the background. So they're all blocking the way. But the work you do in this card is like extracting all of those thoughts represented by the swords so that the path becomes free and open. So this would be a person who's really in great possession of themselves, who's been through that struggle of being small and then, saying like, fuck it, no, I'm free. Like I'm free to be me kind of thing.
Got it. That's great. Yeah.
Any thoughts on this one?
Makes sense, because I think that's kind of the journey I've been on too. So it makes sense that it would be like similar kind of vibe.
Yeah. And that would, if those things are kind of mirroring each other, then there's all this space for kind of processing and
That's great.
All right. And then our next question was, what kind of energy do you want to avoid? And I'm sure you already have some categories or deal breakers in your mind, but we'll see what the tarot has to say.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. I'm going to start on this side, and here we go.
Okay.
Okay, this is a card that is really unique to this deck. It's called the Seeker.
Okay.
And it's got this guy on his knees, and he's poking his head like through the atmosphere. And around his head on the other side in outer space is this like old script that's swirling around his mind, and this torch that's like just, it continues to spiral around and around. And then the moon is there, like benevolently sort of looking down on him.
Yeah.
So this card it was made in this deck to actually represent like the person who's asking the questions, but I think it is just like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So I use it in the deck. So this is interesting because it's like saying in the context of this question, like what kind of energy to avoid, this makes me think of like a Pisces who's like super extreme. So like you're very fiery Leo energy. And then I'm imagining this like very Pisces energy that's like so lost in philosophy that it's almost like too abstracted, or like they're thinking about super theoretical ideas and like wandering through the universe, like asking questions and wanting to know. But this person would be like hard to track down. You wouldn't really know where they were from day to day. Like they would be interesting because they have so many ideas and questions and they're very curious. And someone who's kind of like the seeker would certainly resonate with like what you write about and the worlds that you create. So like at first glance, this might be like a really attractive.
This is exactly what I'm telling you. Like, okay, first of all, this is like every ENTJ I have ever met on the mind. But seekers end up having this like mad crush on me because like it's that curiosity element that is fulfilled by my ability to satisfy the curiosity. But this is what I was, I think, talking to you about before we started recording, is I had just recently been on a few dates with somebody who had seeker energy. And I end up feeling quite like, almost like I'm having like an allergic reaction to them. Like, do you know what I mean? That feeling when like you want to hang out with them, but you know it's bad for you because inside all you feel is internal chaos.
How do you like, what do you think gets ignited in you that's like the allergy?
I think it's because they're quite charismatic and they often tend to be quite attractive. And what that combination makes it that you feel like you're willing to give up your whole life for them. Like if they were like, you need to give up being like, they're almost like cult leaders. And it's funny because I have a secret obsession with cults and like trying to understand how leaders captivate people. And I think it's because every once in a while, once every couple of years, a guy will put a spell on me where I'll just be, my friends always talk about it. They'll say, you'll fall under a guy's spell and completely forget who you are for like a certain period of time. And it's always that energy. 100%. It's always that energy.
Yeah. And they would be so watery and like exploring all these deep caverns and places that if you follow them, you just lose your way and you get sucked into their, like he's literally poking into the cosmos. And in that space, for someone who's very grounded in like earthly business, it would be very disorienting if you spend too much time there. It's like if you stay in a dream for too long or something.
Super. Like I was talking to my therapist about it, and the relationship ended up floating. And I told him all about this guy, and I was like, maybe he just didn't maybe it didn't work because I'm not attractive enough. And he goes, maybe it didn't work because this guy doesn't have a job. So I was like, okay, fair enough. So like, it's that kind of like, you know what I mean? Like when you just lose connection to reality because this person is, yeah, I totally get it. That's exactly right. That could have been the only card. That could have been the only answer to that question.
Yeah, this makes me think of someone I also used to have like a big crush on in my life, a Pisces, and it was like, you know, he was going to come see you, but he would always be like 2 hours, 3 hours late because he was like getting, you know, so he was doing something else that was like so exciting. And yeah, he always had all these different ideas for stuff he was going to do. But I was like, do you have a paycheck? Like, these are great, but anyway, our last question is, how do you open up your life to shake things up a little bit? So as soon as we let someone else in, that's like a new energy, a new psychology, a new set of baggage, a whole different schedule, all the logistics of two people living different lives on the earth. So how do you, like, you want to let someone in, you want to shake things up. People bring new energy that refreshes us and excites us, but obviously the wrong sorts of energies can really take us in directions that are hard to recalibrate from. So this question is, how can you individually in particular open up to to shake things up a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start on this side this time. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay. So you have the Five of Pentacles here, which is a card that asks us to think about our relationship to the idea of scarcity. So this is a card, like you can see, it's a winter's day. The tree is not producing leaves right now. It's snowy. It looks a little bit desolate. In other versions of this card, there's two figures walking outside of a church, and they're definitely kind of down on their luck, having a rough phase, probably lacking in resources. And they're passing the church. Like, you don't see them inside the church getting help. You don't know where they're going next or what their plan is. They do have each other, but there's definitely a struggle and this feeling of like not having enough. So sometimes when I see this card, it makes me think, I tell people, ask yourself what your own relationship to the idea of scarcity is. Like, how much of your work or your energy or your choices are made around the trying to avoid scarcity at all costs in the future. So like if our parents grew up in poverty, for example, they've taught us to save everything and hoard everything and not waste anything, and to be worried all the time that poverty may come again. But their fears may not reflect like our own state of being. And if we're always worried about that, then the fear is really what's driving our choices. I'm rambling a little bit, but
no, that makes total sense.
Okay. And so in this idea of shaking things up, it makes me think about like the success that you've shown with your books. Like, you've made a very successful career out of becoming an author. Your books are all bestsellers. They're hugely popular. So you're not lacking for resources, I'm assuming. And I don't know if you think about, and this doesn't necessarily mean like finances exclusively, right? But just how we're resourced in our lives. And so I don't know if there are some fears around like,
I mean, I think like you're always nervous with books, like, are people going to stop reading and stuff? So you tend to like stay on a path that will, you know, when you're successful in one area, you want to keep going in order to extend that run as long as you can. But I think there's something to be said about doing what you'd like to do, you know, like doing the things that call to you creatively versus doing things that you think are going to be successful just from a financial point of view. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good idea. The idea that like, don't let the fear of it running out drive you, you know?
Right.
Because that's always there.
Yeah. And it's like with the wrong person, there's the potential to get lost and feel like you can't find your way back. Yeah. In which case, the fear of like being out in the cold at some point, being like, wait, who did I used to be, or whatever, like that's a real fear. But if you're connecting with this person who very much understands self-liberation and transformation and like finding one's truth and living one's authentic life and allowing you to like process some things and be healing in different ways, then you get to kind of play with this idea of like, if money were no object, if this is just my passion and not my profession, that other person may unlock in you the potential to like think outside of the practical resources of life so that you might be able to create like whatever, not that you don't make what you.
No, but for sure to be bolder and in thought process without so much fear. I think that makes total sense. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Well, good. I like this idea of shaking things up. And usually, I mean, this could almost be like going, if you've talked about maybe leaving New York, and if you like sold some things and just like packed up, like with if there was no pandemic.
That's what I mean. That's what's so funny about the whole thing is like, I think that was kind of the plan a little bit, and now it's a little bit like, okay, like clearly that energy is from the card is still around. So when the time comes, I'll have to take advantage of it. It's just a strange period at the moment because what's happening now is with the pandemic, it's forcing everyone to stay in their status quo,
Yes.
So we'll have to see how it all turns out. But this has been super useful, as always. I don't like now that like everything's virtual. I'm gonna have to like literally send half the earth to you because everybody needs this in their life.
Well, I'm hoping that our conversation will help more people use tarot in their lives. And I'm happy to take and do readings for whoever may need one. But for those who are watching, it's a 4-card spread once again. And that first question is, what can a relationship potentially do for my life to enhance it or expand it? Question 2, what would be a compatible energy for me? And then question 3, what would be a energy to avoid? And question 4, how can I open up my life a bit to shake things up on the relationship front? And Soman, I think it's so wonderful that you would come on and talk about relationships when I'm sure you spend a lot of time talking about books and writing.
Yeah,
and can I ask one last question?
Yeah, please.
Is there any sort of magical element do you use anything like tarot or something else that's a little eccentric or esoteric in your own creative process?
I mean, I've been meditating, I guess, for 5-6 years. And so I think that to me is always its own like little magic because you just sort of sit there and see where the adventure takes you that day. Mm-hmm. So I think that's always been my big one. It always felt like with meditating, you're stepping outside your own ego. Like you sort of look at you can sort of be the like, okay, you can find the energy that's like the I am, like here is me. And then you automatically tell yourself like that entire energy is fake and is just old mind patterns. And so over time, you get to realize there's all these dimensions of yourself you've never quite used, including all your instincts and things. So that's the closest to magic I think I can think of, Yeah, I think it's the closest you can get to kind of a drug trip without using drugs.
Absolutely. And I imagine that practice, you seem really dedicated to it, that helps you explore these different aspects of self that come out in your writing and also in your life too. Your Leo energy gets to play and express itself in all these different ways.
100%. Yeah. No, I think everybody needs to have some sort of magical practice in their life. Otherwise, I don't know, life will end up feeling so earthbound.
Yes.
Not that we want to end up like The Seeker, but somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between. That's right. It's a fine line. And balance is the trick to everything. So, Soman, thank you so much. I'm so excited to see your book when it comes out. When can we expect it? Do we know what it's called?
Oh, so yeah, the book will come out next September, I think, okay. And we'll be announcing the title and all that stuff early next year because I'm still sort of finishing it, but soon.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to make sure everyone knows where to find you, all the books that are out now, and where they can keep track of everything you're up to.
And I can't wait to share this because I feel like everyone's needs to be, I don't know, doing some tarot with you because I think it'll help their lives. So.
And at least starting to do tarot with themselves. That's my propaganda piece.
Agreed.
Well, thank you so much again, Soman. I love talking to you.
Yes. And hopefully I'll come see you guys soon.
Yes, come visit. We can't wait.
Okay.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we hope you'll try this tarot spread on your own. We would certainly love to hear any of the results that come through. If you're working with your cards, feel free to leave those in the comments below. We would love to know. We want to give a special thanks to Magical Objects for providing our theme song, I'm Ready. You can find more of their magical musical concoctions anywhere that music is streamed or sold. And special thanks to Anar Verold, our editor for this video series. Thank you, Anar. Finally, we hope that you will find us again in another space, maybe our website, typewritertarot.com. You can schedule a one-on-one reading with me or another of our readers. We also offer classes and workshops. We have a membership program that allows you free access to classes and workshops, plus additional rituals and learning materials throughout each month. And of course, we are on social media too at Typewriter Tarot on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We would love to see you again. Thank you so much for being with us today.